Let's talk about the mid-year freakout tag. This tag is obviously extremely popular here on BookTube, and I'm gonna do it this year. Last year I forgot. I mean, I didn't really forget, I just wasn't filming at the time that mid-year tags came out. It bums me out that I didn't do it because I loved doing it the first year I was here on BookTube. But whatever, bring it back, doing it this year. I will say my reading year has been utter, total trash so far. I just have not been reading a lot of books that I absolutely love, which is definitely a bummer. Last year I was so excited about my first couple months of reading. I just read so many great things, whereas this year I just feel like I was really just sifting through garbage, trying to find like one gem to talk about. But I compiled a list, we did it, and I'm going to go through the prompts and tell you what my answers are. I'm also going to link down below whoever created this tag. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but that will be in the description bar below. I didn't want to repeat any books for any of these answers, so while some of these books could definitely be used for more than one answer, I'm trying to keep it one book, one answer, so I can at least spread the love around. So the first question is best book you've read so far, and my answer for this is The Push by Ashley Audrain. This is somewhat of a domestic thriller revolving around a main character who is having a very suspicious time with her new child. She believes that her daughter hates her and is going out of her way to make her life a living hell. The evil kids trope is definitely something I've seen before. It comes up a lot in horror, but I don't know if I've necessarily ever loved it. I love the idea of it because, I mean, kids are creepy, so I feel like they're similar to clowns in which like you have a lot to work with. You could go many ways with it and that there's something inherently creepy about them. But I haven't seen it explored in any new or interesting ways until this book. I absolutely adored this book. I love that there were so many different possibilities as to why her relationship with her daughter was strained. They kind of covered the idea of postpartum depression. They covered this idea of like kind of generational trauma and just the strained mother-daughter relationship kind of passing on through generations, as well as just the idea that maybe her daughter was a psychopath. I feel like the author did such a good job of keeping you on the edge of your seat and making you feel like any of these things could be true. I love that there weren't any easy answers or any obvious villains. So often I feel like there's like kind of a scapegoat or just like this one obvious conclusion that you can point to, and because of that you can usually see it coming. Whereas I feel like this was just very complex and very layered. I can't wait to read more of what this author puts out in the future. Question number 2 is best sequel you've read so far this year. I am terrible about getting to series. I do tend to read on in my smut series, but other than that, I am awful at reading the next book in a series. But I picked up Nevermore this year and absolutely fucking devoured it, and immediately picked up Wundersmith by Jessica Townsend, and it was 5 out of 5 stars. I adored it so much. I feel like if you're on BookTube, you've probably heard what this is about. This is a middle grade series that follows I was about to say Jessica Crow, Morgan Crow. She's led a very unfortunate life. People blame her for everything that goes wrong because she is known as a cursed child. She ends up being whisked away to this magical boarding school, and she has to go through all these trials to try and get into this thing called the Wondrous Society. She basically gets adopted by by her sponsor, and she gets introduced to like all these new people who really care about her, as well as new friends. But she also gets introduced to this like evil person who wants to use her and her powers for evil doings, I guess. I loved the second book just as much as I loved the first. I feel like we just got to explore more of this different fantastical society. We got to know more about Morgan and how her powers work. We got to know more of the history of the place. We got more interactions with Jupiter, who I absolutely adore, as well as Hawthorne, and pretty much every character in this series. I just love them so much. They're so cute and so wonderful, and honestly this book was just lovely. Like, just, that's the word I would use to describe it. There's definitely some darker things in the second book which I wasn't expecting, but I just love this series and I can't wait to read more of it. The third question is a new release that you haven't got to yet. So for this I picked In the Garden of Spite by Camilla Bruce. I read I Let You In, is that it? No, I read You Let Me In, I think that's what it's called, by Camilla Bruce, and absolutely adored it. I read it last year, I listened to it on an audiobook, and I really, really enjoyed it. I believe I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was just a really interesting look at It was just a really interesting look at this one woman and her experience with Faye. But there's also kind of this idea of trauma that she's experienced and whether or not her mind is tricking her, trying to cover up for these things, these horrible things she experienced as a child. And I love that idea so much. Kind of the ways that your brain can try to protect you from the things you've experienced, the way trauma can affect you, but also this like paranormal horror almost elements that were woven in. I just thought it was so great, and so I really wanted to read whatever she put out next, and I actually have a copy of this on NetGalley, and I haven't read it for some reason. Okay, I'm just gonna read you this tagline for this book because I feel like everything about this tagline just makes me want to read this book immediately. An audacious novel of feminine rage about one of the most prolific female serial killers in American history and the men who drove her to it. I love that idea. I love any book that explores female rage, and I mean, it just sounds perfect. So this is like based on true story, but then I believe that Camilla Bruce has like taken it and, you know, made up a storyline for this female serial killer. I also just think that we need more female villains. I love a good badass bitch, and kind of showing the trauma that she's had to go through and how she's going to like take down every man who's ever done that shit to her. Love it. I feel like it's a little bit cathartic for all of us. Fourth question is, what book are you most looking forward to in the second half of the year? That would be The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. I feel like this is probably a lot of people's answers. I actually have not read anything by Grady Hendrix yet, and I really, really want to. I own Horror Store, and I believe I bought My Best Friend's Exorcism on ebook, but for some reason I just haven't gotten to either of them. Both of them definitely interest me, but this one calls to me. It calls to my very soul. This to me sounds very much like what I wanted The Final Girls by Riley Sager to be. I feel like The Final Girls by Riley Sager really like set up this sort of premise, but like completely failed it in execution. And I've heard that Grady Hendrix has a very like meta way of writing that includes like a little bit of humorous aspects, and like I feel like this premise is in good hands with him. So I believe that this is basically based around the idea that all these final girls are in a support group together until they start going missing one by one. I love it, and I hope it's filled with meta commentary on horror movies because I would fucking adore that. The next question is your most disappointing book of the year. That would have to be My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. I was just so disappointed. People built this up to be so great, and it was just so bland. It was so two-dimensional. This is a domestic thriller about a husband and wife team who kill people for funsies to basically revive their marriage. And it's so boring. I started it and I was liking it, but then it just went nowhere. Like those first 50 pages, like you've read the whole book. Essentially, you're going to know where all of it's going because it is so unbelievably predictable. None of the characters are even remotely interesting. None of them are fully fleshed out. They're just perfect 2D images of what you would think a suburban couple is like, I guess, except there's no humor to it. There's no commentary. It's nothing. Like, it was just so boring. It was such a wasted opportunity, and it really bums me out. The next question is biggest surprise of the year, and for me that would have to be In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park. This is a non-fiction memoir about Yeonmi Park's growing up in North Korea and her eventual escape to South Korea as well as China, and then eventually outwards. I've never been one to have like a particular interest in like other nations, like foreign politics. I've never had that much interest in geography or history, and so I didn't think that this would be interesting to me. And as it turns out, I actually do have interest in all of those things. I just didn't have interest in them in school. I mean, that's obviously where a lot of my knowledge of those subjects has come from, is my time in high school. And back then, I hated learning about any of those things. Sitting through history was like my absolute least favorite subject ever. But now that I'm an adult and I can consume these things like on my own time, in my own speed, and in my own way, I actually really enjoy them, it turns out. you get to learn so much about an experience that obviously, like, I would never experience this. I would never have to live this life, and her life is just so much different than anything I could ever imagine, and it was just so interesting. And I mean, the strength that this woman had, the strength that she had even just as a girl, making these decisions for her family to try and escape their country, it was just really, really intense. You know, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about my country's economy necessarily, but you get to really learn about how horrible North Korea's economy is and just how much that affects every person's daily life who lives there. You also get to learn just how, like, bad the brainwashing is and the propaganda is in the country. It's just so crazy. And then learning about, like, how her family left and went to China, and just how bad things were there, because anybody who is found in China will be illegally will be sent back and then enslaved in North Korea. So it was just so much to learn about, and I was shocked by how much I just loved this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The next question is your newest favorite author, or your favorite new to you author. For this, I put Stuart Turton. I read, what the hell is that book called? I read The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, and I really, really loved it. It was just so intensely complex, so layered. Like, there was so much going on, and I mean, I can't imagine how interesting and difficult that must have been to try and plot out, but he did such an incredible job. Everything weaved together so nicely. This is a murder mystery that has different, like, time travel aspects, different, like, Groundhog Day, reliving the same day but in different bodies sort of situation, and it was so, so good, so tightly plotted. I feel like this author just, like, went above and beyond of what I expected from this book. I was not expecting nearly the amount of satisfaction I got from the book, because I thought for sure the ending was going to be completely unfulfilling, but he nailed it. I just truly think that this was incredible. And I'm, like, dying to read whatever else he puts out. I already own his second book, but I haven't read it yet. There's a lot of books I need to get to. What can I say? The next question is your newest fictional crush. Mine is Oscar Montauk from The Boys of Prescott High. I actually read most of this series last year, so this is kind of cheating, but I'm using it. I don't care. I've talked a lot about this series on my channel. This is a reverse harem. It unfortunately takes place in high school, which I fucking hate, but I just pretend that it takes place in college and that all the characters are, like, 25. It makes me feel better. These boys are all members of this gang who, like, rules the school, and this girl, I mean, they all love her, and she kind of, like, calls on them to, like, do her bidding for her. There's a fly in here again. Why do we have fly strips if they don't work? Oscar is kind of the stoic, sarcastic, nerdy one. He's obsessed with his iPad, and he's, like, very intellectual, and he's always got, like, the numbers crunched, but he's also, like, the most violent, but he's also the most violent one out of all of them. Like, he'd be, like, the secret assassin type who is also a nerd. I'm explaining this horribly, but yeah, I'm into it. Like, all of it. Just every single aspect of that I'm into. The next question is favorite fictional character. And once again, for this, I am cheating. For this, it is by far and away Nora Sutherland from the original Sinner series. I just realized there are a ton of birds outside my window that you can probably hear. That's fun. Once again, I read most of this series last year. I think I read the first 4 books, but I read the 5th book this year, so I'm counting it. Nora Sutherland is just, like, everything I want to be in life. She is erotica writer by day, dominatrix by night. She's the type of character, like, who always says the perfect thing. You know, she's always got the witty comeback, the flirtatious look. Just everything about her is, like, goddess. I love, for once, that I'm getting an older character in erotica. Like, I mean, she's in her, like, early 30s, or early to mid 30s, so she's not old by any means necessary, but for erotica, that's practically ancient. I also love that she's kind of a badass bitch who, like, she's super independent, won't let anyone get her down. She is always gonna do what she wants when she wants, but she's also just an incredibly caring individual. She loves, like, with her whole heart. She cares about everyone in her life so, so deeply, and I love when we get to see characters who are both strong and soft. The next question is a book that's made you cry. And honestly, I don't think I've really cried at anything this year. Like, it is just very, very rare. And admittedly, it's rare at any time. I don't cry at books nearly as often as I cry at movies or TV shows. But this year in particular, there's just like nothing that's really tugged on my heartstrings. Or the only thing I thought of was Door of Bruises by Sierra Simone, and like, I don't know how this got me of all things. This book was terrible. I gave it like 2 stars. I was so disappointed in this book. This was the conclusion to the Lesson in Thorns series by Sierra Simone that I absolutely adored up until this point, but I just feel like the book was meandering, way too fucking long. There were so many good ideas that were executed so poorly because they just dragged on and on. But for whatever reason, the like ending scene got me. I don't know why, it just did. I think because I love these characters so much, I'm so attached to them, that with the series ending, it affected me. I teared up. I definitely didn't cry, but that's the closest I've really gotten this year. I think I'm going to do a vlog soon, reading books, seeing if anything can make me cry, so definitely look out for that. The next is a book that made me happy, and for this I have Lotto Men by Anne Denton. This is kind of a romantic comedy erotica that I was not expecting to like as much as I did, but it ended up really winning me over. This is a reverse harem about a girl who is hired by her best friend to run this bachelor-style competition on a private island. Her best friend has won the lottery and she decides that she wants a harem full of men. She hires her best friend who wants to run like a catering company or like a party planning business, and so she sees this as like her first opportunity to really show what she's got. But somehow in the process, she ends up getting a harem of her own. I didn't think this was going to be for me because like the comedy aspects, it's gonna be hit or miss for people. And at first I found it really obnoxious, just like kind of over the top and a little bit silly, but I actually ended up really loving it, and I feel like mostly it was because of the love interests. All 3 guys I just ended up really adoring, and there were some intensely great smut scenes in this. The sex scenes were definitely like the most memorable part of this book and like why I loved it overall, but there is one love interest in this who's a compulsive liar who definitely made me smile a lot throughout this book. So this is definitely one of the ones that made me happiest throughout the year. The next question is the prettiest book you've bought this year, and I honestly don't have an answer for this. I've been on a no-buy all year and I've actually been killing it, so like, look at me go. I never thought that was possible. I am terrible. I have 0 self-control usually, but I think it's because I've been focusing on buying other things like for my apartment and stuff. Anyways, I have really bought no books. I had tons of hauls back at the beginning of the year, but those were all for books I got last year, like at the end of last year, Christmas, etc. But yeah, I just don't have any. But I will put some covers up somewhere. I will put some covers up on the screen of some of the books that have come out this year that I just really love the covers of personally. I don't know what those are off the top of my head because I haven't really looked into it, but I will. The last question on here is, what else do you need to read throughout the rest of the year? And I mean, that is a very loaded question. There are a lot of answers. So I actually didn't write down books for this answer. Instead, I wrote down authors that I really want to try something of in this second half of the year. These are all authors I haven't read anything from, and I just want to read something by them. I'm going to pop pictures up on the screen as I list their names of the books that I think I'm most likely to read by them. So the first is Jade West. I have heard she writes like really intensely dirty books, and we love that. Next is Alma Katsu. I just love how she takes like historical events and puts like a horror spin on them. I think that's really cool and interesting. Peter Swanson, who I've heard writes incredibly good thrillers. Everyone seems to love them, so I really want to read something by him. Nnedi Okorafor. This one I do know which one I want to read. I think I want to read Lagoon. I saved it on my phone because it looked really interesting. But I do own Binti as well. T. Kingfisher. This author seems to blend sci-fi with horror, which I'm very much into, and I think it has some sort of time travel or portal dimension aspects, which, yeah, I'm definitely into that. Malcolm McDowell. Jorline Reeves has talked nonstop about how great his books are, and so, like, she has me convinced, like, I need to read something by him. Jack Ketchum. See previous reason. Melissa Broder. I do know what book I want to read by her. I want to read Milkfed. That book sounds weird AF, and I'm into that. I love weird books. Well, actually, do I love weird books? I love weird media. Weird movies, weird TV shows. I actually don't think I've read that much weird literature. So we'll see if I love it. TBD. Alex Michaelides, obviously The Silent Patient was huge, and that's probably the one I'm going to read, but I am interested in reading his newer book too. Nick Cutter, honestly, I know he's super well known from The Troop, but all of his books really interest me. I think all the synopsises sound really cool. I need to stop talking about each of these because there's still a lot. Clive Barker, Lucinda Berry, Louise Erdrich, Jeff Vandermeer, Kimberly McCreight, and Tanana Reeve Dew. So yeah, that is a long list for 6 months, but honestly, I read 87 books in the first half of this year, so I kind of think that I could probably do it if I actually sat down and stopped playing choices. So those are my answers for the first half of the year. Hopefully my second half of the year will be better. There definitely were some gems in this, but like these are all the good books I read this year, I swear. Like, it has been a short list. I hope you liked this video, and I hope you'll come back again soon. Bye.